Attending the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force, and this is the Joint Behavioral Health and Legal and Justice Systems Committees. Welcome to everybody. Today is September 19th. This is a hybrid meeting, so Jill, I don't know if we have anybody in person meeting. Do we have anybody in person today?
I'm not seeing anyone in our
Not
conference
seeing.
room. No.
Okay, so we're all in Zoom land. Anyways, welcome. These two committees of the Incarceration Task Force meet together jointly. Jill, correct me if I'm wrong, but 4 times a year, right, is what we've settled on?
That's correct.
All right. Anyways, one of the reasons, just as context, that we do this, these two committees just very frequently have issues at hand that are germane to both committees. So rather than drag our presenters to both, we meet in common. With me today is also my co-chair of the Behavioral Health Committee, Dan Hamill. Raylene and Arlene are both co-chairs of the Legal and Justice Committees are not able to be here today, but they'll catch us up on the recording. I'd like to go ahead and read our land acknowledgement, and then we'll go ahead and introduce our presenters today. Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us here together today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. Jill, can you go ahead and scroll down for me just a little bit? Oh, there we go. All right. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first presenter. So today you can tell our focus is on court programs, kind of a current status of our court programs, and Perry will follow up with a presentation that really came out of the, gosh, I'm losing my train of thought here. Our
Competency Restoration Work Group.
Thank you. Competency Restoration Work Group. We've got so many official names. And Perry's going to talk about prosecutorial diversion and some other means that we might be able to hopefully funnel people out of court. But first up, we have Jake Weibush and Bruce Van Glup from District Court. Thank you both to attending today, and we look forward to your presentation.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate you allowing us to do this. I'm going to kind of take the lead here temporarily, at least, and get my screen sharing, hopefully, because we do have some slides. So give me 1 second. Okay, got that slide. Is that up? Everybody see it okay? Excellent. Thanks, Barry. Well, yeah, like I said, Jake Buish and Bruce Van Glup will kind of take it. And I'm going to start off a little bit with just some nuts and bolts of the department, just so you guys are aware of kind of what how we're structured. We have 10 probation officers here in the department. 2 of those are assigned to the behavioral health unit, and soon to be 3, actually. We'll get to that in a few minutes. We have 1.5 probation officers assigned to a domestic violence unit, a high-risk unit, and 1 probation officer assigned that handles the majority of our pretrial cases. The remainder of the probation officers have general caseloads consisting of primarily alcohol, drug, so DUI type offenses, and assault related offenses. If you have any questions, please feel free to jump in as I go along. As far as some of the courts that we do serve here, just to let you know, obviously District Court is, we receive many of our referrals there, and then we have contracted courts with Bellingham Municipal Court, Blaine, Everson, Sumas, and Linden. So we provide probation services for those, and then many of them we are there for their court hearings as well, to assist with the court, to meet with clients that are going to court, as well as we're just closer to some of their houses, where they reside, so we can set up appointments and meet with them when we're at those court hearings. Just to kind of give you a perspective, we have under supervision anywhere between last few months 2,100 to 2,200 total individuals under some type of supervision within the department, spread out amongst those courts listed there.
Jake, real quick, is
Yep.
that pretty consistent? One of the things we're hearing a lot is kind of, courts and our law enforcement systems as well, kind of starving for staff and employees and just kind of a flood or a glut of people. Would you say that that's pretty consistent over the years, or have you noticed that this is kind of a spike or an increase in any way?
I would say, we were higher going into COVID, and then the referrals went down. Then we are slowly kind of coming back out of that COVID low spot. But many of the clients that we are receiving now, though, have much more higher needs and require a little bit more supervision. I think there's Dan Hamill, do you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, Jake, thanks for the info here.
Yeah.
My question is, are they pre-trial or are they serving their sentences?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah. So pre-trial, I think we probably have, boy, I don't have all the numbers. I would say between 300 and 400 of that 2,100 I threw out there are probably pre-trial supervision. So they will be on a pre-trial unit, or they're already on supervision on a post-conviction case when they got a new offense. So then that probation officer will monitor both of those, if that makes sense. So a mix of both.
Are you seeing the case resolution in a fairly orderly time frame, or are you still seeing the kind of the COVID hangover in terms of the people not being able to get into court to get their cases adjudicated?
Sure. I might not be the exact person to answer that, but I do think they have definitely sped up from that COVID kind of the hangover there, where it was drawing out a little further. We have been seeing some quicker resolutions, but again, there might be others that can answer that question better than I can.
Thank you.
Steven?
Jake, correct me if I'm wrong, but Ferndale also has a municipal court. Where do they get probation services?
Great question. They have Todd Anderson. So they have a single probation officer unit out there, the only municipality in Whatcom County that does that. But yeah, they've had that for beyond my years here. So yeah. Okay, I'll keep going. Again, feel free to hop in. Let's see. So some of the common court ordered conditions that we monitor. That top one is really the one that we spend most of the time on with our folks, is the compliance with the court ordered evaluations and treatment. So there's the substance use that's usually always tied to DUIs, as well as any typical offense that has alcohol drug related in the incident, domestic violence evaluations, mental health assessments, and anger management as well. We conduct all of our own UAs here. We collect them here, and then we send them to a lab. We also have the ability to do on-site instant tests, as well as oral swabs that we send in. And for alcohol, we do a lot of portable breath tests, monitoring PBTs here in the office to make sure folks are staying sober. With obviously that's just for the alcohol, but for the UAs, we try to keep a mix. Sometimes we do a confirmed test where we send it in. Sometimes we'll do a swab. We kind of, the more we kind of mix it up and the more variety you have, I think the better results we can have for maintaining so folks are staying clean and sober, and we can monitor that. We monitor for pretrial cases at this point the ignition interlock installations. Very often, if they're put on pretrial monitoring and they've had multiple offenses for DUI, they will be required within 5 days to have an interlock installed in their vehicle. We assist with license plate surrendering and weapon surrenders. The license plates, again, with pretrial for DUIs, sometimes those will the judges will order those be surrendered to our office. And the weapon surrender, we just refer them to the law enforcement agency which they were arrested at, but we do assist them and make sure that transition goes smoothly with everybody involved. We also have the installation and monitoring of compliance with electronic equipment programs. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but those consist of the GPS, the transdermal alcohol monitoring. So the bracelets, whether it's Scram or the TAD devices, that we'll again talk about a little bit, or the portable breath test, the take home units. So that's typically a lot of on the pretrial. We have the municipalities typically work with Friendship Services. We'll assist that transition with them. And then with the county, we are in partnership with the jail alternatives as well to do electronic monitoring for the district court cases. Additionally, we'll have classes for victim impact panels on DUIs. We work in MRT on some of the cases that we'll touch base on here in a few minutes, and driver's awareness and little odds and ends classes that sometimes the court will refer. Oh boy, I got some questions. Mike, go ahead.
Could you real quick, what's the acronym MRT stand
I'm
for?
sorry. We're gonna get to that. Yeah, my bad. Moral recognition therapy. It's
Okay.
where they work. It's you know, working on their beliefs, challenging their beliefs that have led to some actions. So it's a 12-step, not 12-step, well, it's a 12-chapter book that they work through. I'll touch
Okay.
base on that in a few minutes. Yeah. Good question.
Okay, super. And are there any things that you're not able to test for? It seems like you have that was
Yeah.
a pretty complete list of things that you can do. Are there things that you cannot do in your office?
Well, we have, like, you know, certain panels that we run, and it's like a 7-drug test, and we've added fentanyl recently, within probably the last year and a half,
Okay.
which has been interesting, you know, as you can tell, or in the community here. But you know, we can ask for any specific drugs. We have a panel of the most common ones, like I mentioned. If the judge, or if we have a concern, the concern out in the community of an individual using one, we can really order any test that's out there. Some of them are reasonable, some of them are extremely expensive. So it kind of depends on, you know, the situation. But we have the ability to, you know, test for kratom, all those types of drugs that are out there a little more.
Great. And you may hit this later, and please tell me if you're getting a lot
Sure.
of questions. So, but I'm curious about when people violate that. What is a normal course of action if somebody, you know, they're blow and go in their car, it comes up, you know, not clean. Maybe are you going to talk about that? What are some common sanctions, or what
Sure
things
could.
would happen to that individual?
Yeah, let me maybe come back to that
Great.
after we walk through some of the other stuff that we're doing that kind of address that here and there. And
Okay,
then
super.
whatever I don't touch on, please just remind me.
Okay, no
if that
problem.
works
Thanks,
for you.
Jake.
Yeah. Peter, go ahead.
Thanks for presenting.
Yeah.
So do all people on probation, are they required to refrain from alcohol and drugs, or is it just people with alcohol and drug related offenses?
Great question. Yeah, the judges set the conditions, right? So we follow their lead, and typically if alcohol and drugs contributed to the crime, they will more often than not, include that in their supervision, whether it's on pretrial or post-conviction, to address whatever behaviors they contributed to the crime. Yeah. Okay, I will keep going, but again, feel free to jump in. Specialized caseloads, I mentioned that. We have a handful of POs that monitor the general caseloads, and then we also have the smaller caseloads that have more intense supervision ability. And these are, you know, I'd say about half to 2/3 the size of a general caseload. So the number one there is the behavioral health unit, and the probation officers are heavily involved in community resources and engaging their clients. They also participate and contribute to the county mental health court, as well as the city of Bellingham's mental health court. So like I mentioned, we've had 2 probation officers work in that caseload for quite some time. One probation officer will stick with the Bellingham Municipal Court mental health caseload, and then the other one has been working with the district court mental health court. And then on top of those 2 mental health courts that we supervise, there's overflow behavioral health units. So just clients that are referred to our department for mental health purposes will go on those caseloads. We're restructuring that a little bit with some recent funding that we've received. So we're going to have a 3rd one join, and that 3rd one is basically going to do all the mental health courts. So those 2 combined, and then the other 2 staff members will do all the additional referred clients that aren't in the mental health court but require mental health evaluation and services. So we'll have some expansion there fairly soon. We're working on it. High risk domestic violence unit, we've had that for quite some time. It's a great unit for this community. Participates in both the city of Bellingham's DV court that was established some time ago by Judge Lev. It's a great court. And the county's family justice court that Judge Anderson started here a year and a half ago. They run 2 separate weekly DV-MRT groups. Again, I'll get to that in a second, what that looks like and what those are. And then we also facilitate folks onto the DV pots. So the funding that we have available through the city and the county for treatment services for domestic violence. Again, I've got more for that. So hang on there if you have questions. And then we also have the pretrial unit that I mentioned earlier. It monitors the majority of the pretrial cases referred to us from all the contracted courts. So when cases are pending, conditions are set, they need to follow those until their case resolves. We monitor those conditions, and that will not involve treatment. Treatment is not something that's generally attached to pretrial. It's more court reminders, substance testing, good behavior checks, those type of things. Stephen?
Jake, I know the pretrial services unit in Superior Court also does pretrial monitoring.
Yep.
A lot of times people have multiple charges, I assume. Well,
Yep.
Do you have overlap monitoring with pretrial releases with Superior Court and district or municipal courts?
So we'll take all the municipal courts except for Ferndale. So we have all those ones. As far as the, I don't know off the top of my head. I have to check with Tim Benson. He's the one that runs he's on the pretrial unit there in our office. I would imagine. I mean, we've worked with Alan quite a bit. We touch base, and I don't know specifically how many, but I could almost guarantee there's some that we do share. Yes.
Thank you.
You bet. Okay. So programming has been something we've been focused on. So that before this, we kind of talked about the caseloads, and so the programming is, a lot of this is kind of we've developed just to fill the needs in the community where we've seen gaps. And so I'll touch base on those, and I have a slide for each one of these. So again, hopefully I can answer questions that you might come up here from just the introduction slide here. So the DV POTS is a domestic violence perpetrator for opportunity for treatment services. So again, it's funding that we facilitate for individuals to get DV treatment. We have an in-house DV MRT, so domestic violence moral recognition therapy. It's again, I have another slide that's going to talk a little more details about what that looks like. We have a standard moral recognition therapy. We also have now an anger MRT class that we have implemented in the last year. And then the electronic equipment program and the text messaging reminder service that we've been doing for some years. So let me get to each one of these, and I'm going to unpack it as we go. I will say also, Judge Anderson might be hopping in here. She's going to join if her child got out. So just a heads up. Okay, so DV POTS. This came to us a couple of years ago. It's funding for from both the city of Bellingham and through Whatcom County for indigent defendants when domestic violence evaluation and probation is ordered by the court. So if they come in here, they screen indigent, DV evaluation is ordered. We can see if the possibility for funding is there for them. The agencies must be state certified and enter into a contract with Whatcom County. We only have one right now, so it's a little bit limited on how many we can send out. We do our best. We've had two when this started. Those two are no longer in our community, and so we've had some transition there. It hasn't been perfect, but I feel like we're back on a good place. We currently had, since the beginning, I believe 69 individuals have been given an opportunity for this funding. 20 of those are currently active, and all Whatcom County referred individuals also participate in Judge Anderson's Family Justice Court, as well as the City of Bellingham's DV Court. We are seeing, at least at the beginning, that even giving them the funding wasn't always a magic wand to get them into the treatment. We needed something else. They're on supervision, but they still were just dragging or still didn't want to, or for whatever reason, it was, not the only barrier to get them in. So that's where Family Justice Court, and fortunately the City of Bellingham already had theirs in place, but it's just that added monitoring with the judicial officer. So we're there, probation's there, the client's there, and a judge is in front of them, making sure they are following through with the treatment services that are being covered by the city or the county's expense. So we've seen a little bit greater outcomes. It's still been a little bit challenging to monitor those, just given the limited resources. Like I said, the one treatment provider here in the county. So questions at all about DV POTS? Yes, Peter.
Who's the agency performing the
Phoenix Counseling. So they were Eastern Washington. They had 4 branches over there. And then they've last June, May or June of a year ago of 22, they entered into contract here and opened up a branch in Whatcom County. Yeah. They also have Spanish speaking classes as well. So they're a good agency. Yeah. Stephen?
So I think I'm reading between the lines here, Jake, but we've talked in the past about the hurdle, that requirement that mental health and substance use disorder treatment be voluntary. I think I'm hearing that there's a lot of resistance to acknowledging the need for any DV monitoring or treatment from this group is that particularly true in this area? Are there any models I know you research best practices periodically. Are there any models for actually, cracking the nut with some of these offenders?
That's what we're trying, that's what with the enhanced, monitoring by a judicial officer. It's tricky. I gotta say too, the majority of these are high risk individuals with priors and probably more resistant because of that and have struggled to address their issues or wanting to address their issues. So, you have to consider the pool, I guess, the individuals that we are selecting for these. So it's going to be a little more challenging. As far as other programs, I don't have necessarily the outcomes of what's greater than the other. I will touch on the DVMRT, which we also have here. Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question at all, Stephen, but
well, usually having priors also ups the stakes for cooperation by the offender as well, because the potential penalty could be more severe. Does that not apply with this group of folks?
I mean, yes and no. It's really kind of individually, whether they, whether they've been in jail for 10 days or 90, it can be a challenge to get them to really want to commit to a different lifestyle. That's why we're trying to have a variety of options there for them. So I will keep going, and again, feel free to jump in as I go.
Jake, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead.
One more follow-up.
Yep.
Are you tracking any outcome data on MRT with this group of people? Success in terms of avoiding future charges, or particular kinds of charges have better or worse prospects?
We will, we've only been doing it for a few years now. So I have been monitoring all of those in and how they've completed, not completed, those type of things. As far as reoffending, we haven't done that yet, only because it's fairly new and kind of want to give that perspective of the years and see how long that lasts. But it's something we will be working on in the near future for both the MRT and the DV bots. So the DV-MRT, it's an alternative to standard DV treatment and evidence-based cognitive behavioral approach, a 24-step workbook that they are provided and facilitated by trained probation staff. We have, I believe, 5 staff that are trained in that and are able to provide this service. Typically, they're offered to clients when maybe DV POTS is not an option and they're still remain struggling financially. When the standard program is not meeting the defendant's needs, or when a substance use evaluation is also ordered by the court. And the reason for that is obviously sometimes they're inundated with just a lot of stuff, a lot of evaluations, a lot of things that maybe one is going to be a miracle to get done. So if they get that SUD eval done, we can offer this option at them and kind of take some of those barriers down for the assessment. So that's some of the reasons why we implement this or offer this as well. We've had 88 individuals to date have participated, 16 currently in the program, 39 have completed to date. And this started before the DV-MRT, actually, when we were the DV POTS, boy, all sorts of acronyms. Because we were losing providers and we needed to have some kind of a resource. We had 2 providers at that point and one, I think, shut the doors. So we had an abundance of folks to send the treatment. So we looked into some research and found this option. And I guess if you look around the state, there's many jurisdictions that offer this as well by the courts. So again, it's no cost to the clients. We provide them the book and we host this via Zoom. It's on a weekly basis. It's a great program. I do one of the groups. I really enjoy it. Peter?
What's the challenge in keeping providers?
I guess probably more, I think the successful ones I have seen honestly out there are the ones that do it in conjunction with alcohol drug treatment or other types of referrals. I don't know if it's, if another place comes in, takes away clients or referrals, if it's just not enough to sustain a business, maybe is what I've seen. If you're a mental health professional, you have that, on the side as well. You're, doing therapy, and then do this in conjunction with it. That might be a better model. But to do just this, we've had one in the years past, Brian May, who was here for many years, probably 20 years. And when he closed his doors, he was basically the only one that was a sole DV treatment provider. Everyone else has kind of had it tied into other agencies. Does that make sense? Okay, anger MRT, that's something we've started here recently as well. This is for non-intimate partner only. So we're talking siblings, roommates, bar fights, those type of things. We're not going to mix the intimate partner into this group. It's just not appropriate. This is also an evidence-based cognitive behavioral approach. It's an 8-step workbook, so much shorter, facilitated by probation staff here that have been trained in it. And again, it's to no cost to that client. So this is a kind of an abbreviated, takes that power. There's no power and control really tied into this. There would be with a domestic violence perspective, but it's addressing their reactions and anger outbursts. So that was the start a year ago, fairly new. We probably had 15 to 20 or so individuals go through that. We have probably 5 or 6 in there right now. So it's a great resource. Steven.
Same question about tracking outcomes and keeping data on this.
Yep.
Is that in the pipeline?
Absolutely. Like I said, we're not yet a year into it, I think, but that's certainly something we will, as it unfolds, and continue to work on it. Absolutely.
That would be data I think the whole task force would be interested in seeing and having posted publicly, so the general community can see the effectiveness of the work you're doing.
Great. And then a standard MRT. So I know a lot of MRTs don't have just, we have the DV, the anger, and then this is just a standard component. This is evidence-based, obviously cognitive behavioral approach, but it's addressing the criminal thinking and the behaviors that follow that. So it's a 12 chapter book, facilitated again by trained staff. And typically this is used, like it says, they're available if they're struggling to make healthy life choices. So when they're violating their probation, they're getting new charges, they're not showing up, they're doing just things that are contributing to snowball effect in their life and not getting out of it. This provides them an alternative perhaps to a jail sanction that might have been imposed in the past, and they're going to be a part of this group. Again, this is Zoom once a week, and they do the homework in their workbook, they present on it, they do well, they pass, they move forward. So it's really on them. It's a great group. They hold each other accountable. Our staff honestly just facilitate and allow them to kind of hold each other accountable. It's a fantastic group, and this is again no cost to the client. So we have these workbooks here, we give them out when they've been ordered by the court. Electronic equipment program. Oh, Peter, go ahead. Oh, yeah, I think you're muted.
I'm so sorry. I'm trying to find a definition for recognition, but
It's a made-up word. Yeah.
it's what I'm seeing is reconation. Is there a difference?
Yeah. I think it's honestly when those that have written the MRT workbook is a word they came up with to address that belief, addressing their belief and the actions that come from their beliefs. So
I think that it is misspelled on the slide, and it's
Uh-oh.
recognition.
I apologize.
That's okay.
Thank you.
I think that's the confusion.
Thanks, Maya.
Hey, Jake, if it offers any help, I have a definition that I pulled up.
Hey, let's hear it. Thank you, Perry.
The word recognition comes from the psychological terms connotative and connotation, both of which refer to the process of making conscious decisions. MRT is a cognitive behavioral treatment system that leads to enhanced moral reasoning, better decision making, and more appropriate behavior. Not my words, just what I found.
Perry, I'm gonna put you at the front of this slideshow and include your name on there. So
I'm already following an awesome presentation, so I'll just stand by.
I'll edit it for my next go around here. Thank you. Hope that sorry for my misspellings there. Okay, we'll move on from the MRT here. So electronic equipment program. Again, this is one of the, another tool that we have here in our tool chest for supervision. And these are in conjunction with our partnership with the Whatcom County Jail Alternatives for county cases, county referred district court cases. So the TAD is a transdermal alcohol device, bracelet around their ankle that monitors alcohol. The SoberLink is portable breath test. So it's a device, a handheld one. They blow into it. It actually has a camera in it to make sure it's them throughout certain increments throughout the day, between 4 and 6, depends on the need. We've had, I think since the implementation of 2018, we've had over 300 different individuals participate in this. I've had experience of growth in the last year. Last 2022 had averaged about 31 individuals for the May through July. And then this year, that's gone up quite a bit. So that uses, you can see there's about 46 average. We've had a high as I think 58 one month, maybe in June. And then those referred to this are, it's almost exactly a 50-50 split between pretrial cases and post-conviction cases. So pretrial cases are when they're on pretrial monitoring. And again, something like similar to the interlock, when they've had, you know, multiple offenses or extremely high DAC, the judge will add pretrial monitoring plus one of these devices to make sure that they are remaining sober while out on release. For post-conviction cases, it typically applies when they violated their terms, continue to drink, struggling to stay sober. So they will be referred by the court to one of these devices, as well as on post-conviction cases, have treatment services that they are paired along with. So it's a very great tool to have when they're in treatment and obviously needing a little extra monitoring to stay sober. Any questions about the electronic equipment program? Mike?
Jake, what kind of relationship do you have? It looks like you do a lot. I'm surprised at how many therapeutic options that your office is directly offering with substance use disorder treatment. What does that relationship look like when they're getting remanded to treatment somewhere for their SUD? You're doing the electric monitoring. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like and what the go-between is between your office and those agencies?
You bet. Yeah. So fortunately, we have a handful of facilities here in our community. It's not just one or two. So, whether it's CCS or Lifeline or CMAR, or I don't know number offhand, at least 8 to 10 of local SUD providers. So we give them the list. They can choose, they have that choice of where they want to go. And then we help them, bridge that gap, get them there. So certain places have, walk-in hours. We try to, assist them along, where they live, what type of insurance, they have, those type of, again, they have that choice. We kind of help them narrow it down depending on which places take which type of insurance. And then once they get there, those treatment agencies send us monthly compliance reports, if not more often, so we monitor their attendance, making sure they're going, making sure they participate. Any red flags that come up while they're in treatment, they notify us immediately, positive tests, those type of things, then we take action. But there's a lot of dialogue between us and the providers. Obviously a release is required to be signed so we can do that, but that's kind of, and again, those are for post-conviction cases when they've been ordered by the court to have the treatment. Does that help, Mike?
Oh, that's totally helpful. And I just had one question about
Sure.
the kind of the equipment itself. I think most of the things you mentioned really are good at detecting alcohol.
Yes.
Do you have any that detect, you mentioned earlier a fentanyl test, right? Is there any type of bracelet or is there any type of equipment that helps your office, help support those people who may have MOUD?
We have some folks coming in twice a week for UAs, or more often. We have some random, there are some patches that are out there. The problem with those is, I actually was at a conference this past June. We're talking to a provider there, and there's some great things you can do with that, but there's also, a lot of variables with that, like when was the use, environmental, those type of things. So there's nothing, we're open to it. There's nothing perfect that's out there, but we do a lot of substance UA testing or oral testing for the, for the drug use.
Yeah, but there's no corresponding great thing that doesn't allow the car to start, right? Like there is for alcohol, there's really not for these other substances.
Not that I'm aware of.
Nothing aware of. Okay, thank you.
Great question. Stephen?
Jake, how long does fentanyl remain in the bloodstream, so it would be testable.
Yeah, only a couple days. Two, depends on use. I mean, again, body size, how much was used, frequency of, if they're using all the time, it can remain in there quite a bit longer. A lot of variables. I'd say, I don't know, someone might have that answer better than me in this meeting, but I'd say between 2 and 4 days is probably average.
Thank you.
Dan?
Hey, Jake, to what extent do you guys work with any tribal entities like Swinomish? They've got a clinic off of Highway 20, and then Lummi Nation has a Suboxone clinic. I'm just trying to get a gauge on to what extent your clients are using those services.
Quite a bit. If they qualify to go there, it's one of the agencies we work with, just like any of the CCS or Lifeline, like I mentioned. So we have quite a bit of crossover and good working relationships with both of those agencies. Same with Genesis out at Nooksack, fantastic agency.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the crime can occur in Bellingham, and they can go to any of those facilities, whichever works best for them. Let's see. Okay, and then this might be near the end here, the text messaging reminder service. So we send daily text reminders to all probation appointments and scheduled substance tests, scheduled once, and then also text reminders sent prior to all court hearings for 7 local courts, including Superior Court. So this is kind of a snapshot again from 2022. Kind of shows you how many texts we sent out. That's the number of texts there, and then the success rate is just that the text went through. This is not monitoring whether they showed up for court and resolve their case. This is just like, yes, we send the text, yes, they went through. And this kind of just gives you a picture of how many texts we send out on a daily basis. We have some wonderful clerical staff here that do a lot of our text messaging. Probation officers do some of theirs as well for their appointments. But the courts text reminders are there's a lot that goes on there. But we've seen, it's a great service. We see a change in the ability to see our clients. We can communicate with our clients quite a bit better with the text messaging, like, hey, can you give me a call? Hey, we want you in here before 4 o'clock today. It's just a great tool that we're able to take advantage of and provide. So let's see, I think that's about it. So if there's questions. So Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question from your perspective. What are the barriers to expanding the number of people that can be in mental health court? Because we've heard in the past that, there are 10 or more people in jail who could be in mental health court, but there's no space for them.
That's quite a complex question. Maybe others can jump in here as well. There's, whether it's resources, for city, certain, whether they qualify, the desire to, it's a fairly extensive program. It's a 2-year commitment. Potentially a great outcome for them. But they have to want to do it. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in there, Perry, or anyone else.
I will. I think staffing is a big part of it.
Sure.
And that's sort of on a lot of fronts. We have one attorney who does mental health court, and she's and honest boy, it's grown, right? Because they split the calendars. So
Yes.
it takes up more time now. There's 2 sort of groups. The first calendar is the dual diagnosis, SUD, serious mental health. And then the second group is more focused just on the serious mental health, not the SUD aspect. And the first group is full right now, or very, very close. I think it's full, and they actually can't admit people. So some people graduate to the next, after the second group. And so, and the acuity of people is higher than it's ever been before. And so the demands on like our attorney who has to meet with those clients, that attorney is being taken away from their normal caseload work, and that work is increasing for them. But that's true for all of the people involved in the system. And Judge Anderson has a very limited amount of time to be devoted to the calendar. So to do it effectively, there would need to be more judicial time, there would need to be more case managers, there would be more public defender time, more prosecutor time, and then also more services for those caseworkers to refer the people to for services. So it's like a whole system. The whole system is limited by resources right now, I think, and then also, I mean, not just money resources, but skill and people resources. So we would love to see it expand, but that would have to be really an intentional growth that would require expansion on all of those fronts.
Yeah, right now the pre-group meeting, I believe, is at 1. They get out at 2:30. Court starts at 2:30, and they are barely ever done by the 4:30 end of the calendar. It's really it's moving fast, and they're in district court. It's maxed out right now. Peter?
As a follow-up,
Oh, go.
I think there are other therapeutic courts that are less than 2 years, and I've heard for some that's a barrier. You know, they'd rather serve 6 months in jail and they're out rather than commit to 2 years. Do you have any comments on that?
I don't know the 2 years, the model that has been taken here, and I believe there's the steps that correlate to that. I'm not sure if there's been discussion on any other options. Let's see.
I
You
think.
know,
Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead, Maya. You're doing great.
I think the time frame of involvement is individually determined. I mean, it's not necessarily 2 years, but it can be up to 2 years. And so that's decided by the treatment team. And you're right that mental health or therapeutic courts are not attractive options for some people. I mean, some people are going to say, I would rather just serve the time and be done and not have this level of supervision in my life. And certainly if it's someone who's got a misdemeanor offense, maybe it doesn't come out in the wash for them to participate in a program of that intensity. And that is why the majority of folks who are involved in at least the district court mental health court are coming from felony drop downs or some combination of involving those more serious cases, not just misdemeanor folks. And I don't think we have the capacity to make it attractive for people who are charged with misdemeanors like that.
I would fully agree with what Maya is saying, and it is really interesting to watch it from a clinical perspective. That oftentimes individuals that do become involved in mental health court, and with some concern about that time frame, begin to realize that really, amongst the other aspects, a key feature of mental health court is really that it has wraparound service with a lot of attention paid to the individual, case management and the other services that they need to be involved in. And oftentimes, at least the feedback that I get from clients and et cetera, is that this is really the first time in their life that they've had this level of, maybe their adult life, that they've had this level of stability. And they didn't expect it, in terms of a court-involved, process. And so it is interesting that it's not attractive from a time frame, and it's perceived certainly judicially as a punishment or as a consequence. And interestingly enough, it's not the design, of course, of the therapeutic courts. The focus and interest is in addressing the individual's needs and effectively supporting them to be able to be more productive for them in their lives and within the community. So very interesting dynamic that we run into there.
Yeah, a couple questions, Peter. I think you're muted.
So it sounds like the jury's out on the data and the quantitative part of what you've presented. I'm interested in, any qualitative data you can give me, just from your perspective. What is working really well? What is not working very well?
As far as I think the equipment program is a great resource, and I think that's working great. I really enjoy all the MRT programs because we get to see that growth, that change, that firsthand when we're operating those, and kind of seeing those aha moments. So that's really neat to see. The DV treatment, additional services would be, what we have is good. They do a great job, but more, more options for efficiency. And yeah, Bruce, do you want to jump in there? I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the data piece of it. What we're lacking is our own local data from our own programs, but what isn't lacking is like on the MRT programs is nationwide data. And the only reason that we adopted these programs is because they had been proven elsewhere. So it was a very low risk kind of maneuver to say, okay, I mean, we looked at a lot of different kind of options, but it was pretty low risk with what we went with in terms of, will it address criminogenic risk factors? Will it address recidivism? Because it had been proven to be effective in other places. And one of the worries I have about local data that we will come up with is it needs to be understood in the context of with the programs we run, we're never going to have large numbers with which to draw serious data
Outcomes, yeah.
assumptions or results. I mean, we'll present what we have is what we have, whatever it works out to be. But it's it'll be a pretty small sample size compared to other studies that have been done on a much larger scale using that use these programs. And so it just we only went with these programs because they'd already been proven elsewhere. Right. Yeah.
Stephen?
Jake, I wanted to go back. I was trying to make sense of your chart on text reminders, but before I get to my question, I just want to say that I thought that was a particularly rich exchange about about our therapeutic courts. I think the general public sees those in pretty simplistic terms, both in their scale and potential effectiveness. And I thought both Maya and Perry brought out some pretty key points, and I appreciate that part of this conversation. On the text reminders, you had a column that said no text sends, and then the successful column about a message getting through. So I'm wondering what it meant by getting through. Maybe there was no workable service at that number anymore. And since it was supposed to go for all hearings and so forth, I wondered why there were no texts sent in a fairly sizable portion of the cases.
Yeah, either no number or a poor number that didn't go through. Bruce, is that correct?
Right. The only reason we would not send a text message is if we do not have a valid mobile phone number to which to send it. If we have a phone number, we send it. So that's what that number, the no sent is. We just simply didn't have a number to send it to.
And for the folks that we have them in our database to send the text message out so that we save those numbers, and then we get lists from each court of their, of the folks that they need text sent to, and generally numbers are listed on those as well. So if we have a different number or a new number, we'll also input that into our database and then include that as well in the text. So we're constantly getting new numbers, updated numbers as we have these calendars come to us.
Thank you both.
Yeah. Eric.
Yeah, so I was in and out a little bit, and I hope I'm not asking a question that you've already answered, but I'm wondering if you could address how you encourage folks to participate. And you mentioned text messages just now, but I know that the courts are struggling with that, and not only district court, but in municipal court and superior court too. So I'm just wondering if you have any comments about that.
Participate, like showing up for court or in the program?
Yeah, showing up for court, showing up for treatment, showing up for whatever you're requiring them to be at.
What as far as court, we're checking in with them on an ongoing basis, depending on their risk level, and sending these texts. So that's kind of for the pretrial ones. Those are kind of the really all that we do there. As far as engagement, we do our best to take down barriers as possible. That's why we've kind of got these programs going, take down that financial barrier with substance use evaluations. There's quite a bit of funding that's available there for them. I'm not sure what else there I could touch on as far as getting compliance. Doug?
Just real quick, Jake, and stop me if I missed it. I'll admit I was trying to multitask here.
Yeah.
You were talking about mental health court, and it's a 2-year program. Is that right?
Yes.
Are there benchmarks through that program that they have to hit, say at the 3-month, 6-month, in order to continue in the program, or do we not decide if they're going to complete it until the end of 2 years?
No, there's phases that they work through. I
Okay.
believe there's 4, if not 5. Perry, maybe you can touch on that.
Yeah, there's 5 phases,
Thank
and
you.
there are very specific measurable achievements and components, attendance, being substance use free, et cetera. That and then there's a fairly significant, a lot of the mental health court anyway, and I think it's true also for our recovery court. Literally, the group is used to influence the individual, if you will, the other participants in the court program, and there's pretty significant celebration when an individual moves into a new phase, has some additional responsibilities, maybe even kind of on a contingency management level, may reach as a matter of fact, will reach a point of where they're coming to court maybe once every 2 weeks as opposed to once per week. So there are built-in incentives for that process. And so it's very specifically defined and measurable. Great question, Doug.
Yeah, I would just, when you were talking about capacity, I would, certainly let's get as many people in and help them as we can. But if they're not, if they're in a program that has limited space and they're not interested in continuing on, maybe we should look for those people that, desperately need that program and that treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to go back to a comment that Maya had mentioned earlier in this conversation about higher acuity, and I want to get my my thinking around that as to why that might be, and maybe that's a question for Maya, maybe it's a question for Eric or others on this call, but I'm trying to get a sense of why that's happening. We're seeing some of these things, occurring in the community, but I just wanted to get opinions on that.
Well, I'm glad Courtney has her hand raised. Maybe it has to do with this question, but because Courtney is our behavioral health specialist, but it's hard for me to make generalizations about like the acuity in the community. I would say that we've seen over the years, shifts in what cases are coming into mental health court. And I would say right now is a time when the prosecutor's office is approving applications for individuals who are more complex and maybe have more serious offenses, and allowing resolutions that will allow those people into mental health court. That has expanded the numbers of people, but also the difficulties that the folks face. So I think that's part of it. I think that's as much as I could probably reflect on. I don't know, Eric and Courtney might have other observations.
I would just say that generally speaking, it is not easy to get treatment in the United States or Whatcom County right now. And it is very hard for people to maintain that progress when they're starting out in the program if there aren't places in the community that can receive those referrals from mental health court, if they're understaffed, and also housing. I think a big part of the acuity we're seeing is people struggling to survive. We know there are a lot of options in the community, but and I know this is a word that's been repeated a lot, but they're very siloed. And mental health court has a lot of resources, but we also, they need enough providers with these agencies in the community to link people to, so that they can continue through those phases. And a lot of people coming into the program, they have no housing, they have no family, they have no natural supports, and mental health court becomes their support system. But that team on their own, it cannot provide all the services that the people in the program need. So they'll be connecting them to, a prescriber in the community, a counselor in the community, a case manager in the community. And then they also have the case management and assistance from the program. But I mean, Whatcom County is hemorrhaging behavioral health care providers, and the folks that are working at the front lines, and we're also hemorrhaging prescribers too. So, I mean, it's kind of like what Maya said earlier, it's a system-wide issue. I could probably go on, but I will try not to. But I would say housing, basic needs, lack of available services, and communication between those entities.
So if y'all want to hear what I think about it, it's I think generally we got a pretty good answer from Maya about how the prosecutors are handling things. We have expanded the kinds of cases that we will send. That's what the community demanded. You know, I'm happy to hear that my prosecutors are actually thinking about those kinds of things, because you know, it's been something I've understood for quite some time, that a lot of the charges that we have are based on mental illness, and in helping people with their mental illness issues is going to stop recidivism. So that I'm glad to hear that that's what the public defender is seeing. I mean, I'm ecstatic about that. But the downside, of course, is that we do need a larger mental health court, more treatment. I mean, and Jake nailed it when he's talking about how we have to intentionally expand if we're going to do it. But it's probably time to start looking at that. That'll stop.
You know, one of the things that I'd add to this, just from to a certain extent, my background and just observing some of this, that for a lot of individuals, being involved in the court or being involved in probation, you know, that sort of thing, there is, of course, that that leverage, that component of, if you don't do what you need to do, you're going to get into trouble. There's going to be consequences that are going to come out of that. And I think that, you know, one of the things that can happen for individuals that are struggling with mental health disorder is there's not necessarily as much influence, you know, along those lines. And that's why I absolutely am thrilled about mental health court, that the response tends to be more productive for the individual actually getting support, you know, whatever those resources might happen to be. And I'm not suggesting that it should be one way or the other, but have found that folks are just really not connecting to that potential consequence as much as they connect to the resources and the support that they're getting through you know, the therapeutic courts like mental health court. Just again, kind of an observation that it's like a lot of, you know, for me, I don't drive over the speed limit because I don't want to get, you know, a ticket, and I don't want my insurance to go up, and etc. And so it's really I would, you know, drive over the speed limit if none of those consequences were there. But it's something that I keep in mind, and it limits my behavior. And so I don't know how helpful that is, but it's just an observation that I've made, that I think that we're really on the right track, that individuals need resources, they need support, as Courtney was saying, you know, they really need that connection, and they don't necessarily expect it, because of course going to court, it's a scary thing. You're going to sit in front of a judge. There's not any kind of unique development of a relationship, interestingly enough, like there is in a therapeutic court with that judicial officer, and the individual knows them, they know their first name, they know what's going on with them, and they're connecting to that individual. And I think that that's a huge, I firmly believe that the research shows that that's a huge component of that. I will also add that I'm actually involved in interviews this afternoon for an additional mental health court staff. So we're really thrilled about that. I happen to be the supervisor for Robin Willens. She's the mental health court program manager. And, you know, the real challenge there has been that absolutely true what others have said as far as resources within the community and so forth. And so Robin and her team have literally been extending themselves to act in that manner, or to try and fill those gaps for these individuals in need. And that oftentimes is honestly the challenge of her being able to, you know, do some self-care and you know, maintain her own boundaries, because the need is there. Obviously the individuals are there, and it's just another aspect of the capacity at this point of mental health court, along with other things that are said. So hope that's helpful.
Stephen, got your hand up?
Yeah, thanks, Jake. I just, a couple of thoughts from this. Again, a really good discussion. I just want to remind people that a couple of years ago, we brought in an outside evaluator from the National Association of Drug Court Professionals to look at our recovery court program. And the recommendation from their set of national best practices was that we admit higher risk defendants into recovery court. At that point, the prosecutor's policy was more restrictive than that, and I think we held on to that. So it is a best practice that we take these higher risk people, and I assume the same is true for mental health court. Kudos to Eric for his office taking those steps. I think the fact that we're challenged in making that effective does not call for us to dial back on that, but it calls for us to more aggressively address the community supports, the community resources, and the treatment provider capacity. So I think we're on that track, and I hope we stay on that track and keep trying to deal with the sort of the hardest to serve, because they also have, you know, if we succeed with them, the benefits to the whole system and the community are that much greater. So that was the reasoning behind the national best practice, and I think we ought to keep working on that. I also just want to ask Jake and Bruce, I guess, a lot of this presentation has been on the rationale and the smooth operation of some of these well-selected interventions. Echoing Doug's and Perry's points, I think one of the things we've lacked is any sort of consequence of late, because for a long time we weren't conducting non-compliance hearings. There was no potential for a couple days in jail as a consequence for non-compliance. And I'm just wondering what you think, where we are with that, and maybe Eric and Maya as well, where we stand with that potential and the potential benefits of having some consequence that I think we still don't have in much of an effective scale.
Yeah, I mean, for certain individuals, it's just necessary, right, to have that consequence there and that they know and that can be imposed. Some, not others, not so much. You know, we do a handful of community service when they're in violation. They're given maybe some warnings more so than they have in the past, or days held in advance to incentivize them. Like I said, that MRT, that's a class we've implemented just to have another option out there for those that are just not getting it, not making the right choices, and to try something different. But having that jail option there is it's well known by those that are on supervision. Yeah. Darlene, did you want to jump in? Oh, go. Sorry.
If I could just jump back in with one more question on the question of support in mental health court. I think most of us were pretty excited when Brian Estes reported a while back that NAMI was developing a clubhouse model program, and that seems like the kind of support that would really benefit mental health court folks and others not in that program. I'm wondering, after the questions are done, maybe Brian could update us on the status of that program development locally.
Darlene, I saw your hand go up when I was talking. Was there something you wanted to throw in there in addition
I was
to?
just going to say that from the city of Bellingham, probation has really been instrumental in helping us with our lack of ability to use jail services, to increase our programs, not only with mental health court, we have a domestic violence court, we have a probation court. The people that we have on pretrial that are wearing bracelets so that they're not contacting victims, or if they do, we know right away. It's just been invaluable. They send the text messages to our defendants when they have court hearings. It's a way that we have improved our ability to prevent issuing warrants. There have just been so many great things. And so our contracting with probation has really been instrumental in furthering our objectives to keep people out of jail, to find other alternatives. So I just wanted to publicly thank them for their service and say how much the city relies on them and appreciates them.
Thank you, Darlene. Very appreciate that. We very much appreciate you. Heather.
Thank you for the presentation, Jake. One thing that I've thought about a lot is the goal of reentry being the orientation and mindset throughout the entire system. And your presentation really felt aligned with that. So I'm grateful, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems like your spirit is to that reentry goal. I am curious though, your perspective on so when I've done the analysis on our bookings in the jail, the top 2 charges that I see, and I'd love for anyone to correct me if I'm wrong, because I could be, but are DUIs and DV, and assault DV related. And they're also the top 2 recidivating charges. So we're seeing those people cycle in and out quite a bit. I wish we had a really clear dashboard to understand, exactly how many re-offenders we have. I'm curious what your thoughts are on how we can better support or what else we need to build. I really appreciate, Courtney, your comments about it. We're just seeing people really struggling to survive, period. And we've allowed the criminal justice system to become our safety net as a society. And it's not always equipped to be the best one, but because you're so close to some of these clients, I'm really curious your perspective on what would help people not recidivate, and like how could we support the really efficient throughput of those 2 bookings, those 2 categories of bookings in our jail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, resources are key there, right? And being able to engage folks in local resources with, because the fear of jail is not gonna change behavior. So we got to work on the behaviors that are underneath it. So having those options there and engaging them as quickly as possible to alleviate that reoffense, right? So quicker they can get in, to treatment and having those options available to them. The trick is it can be hard when a case is pending and to have them resolve it's not always, the next day and get them in the treatment the next day, right? So those are some battles that we have to kind of work with. And the same with domestic violence. I mean, the study shows the quicker to the incident, the more aggressive you can be to get them work on those behaviors and the actions that come from their beliefs, that the better the outcomes there. So I don't know the exact answer to that, because I understand the court system as well, but that the engagement is a huge part of that, and obviously having those resources here available as and many options for those resources. I don't know if that answers it. That's kind of a quick snapshot. I know there's plenty more that could be added to that, but I think you're muted there, Heather. Sorry. Eric, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to go back to the idea of about probation violations and recovery court violations and using the jail. I've been talking to Lee Grockmall. She handled recovery court for a number of years, and during COVID, they lost their opportunity to use the jail for violations. And she tells me that they were able to get people on track without using the jail. She told me that it was best practices for recovery courts to not use the jail,
right?
And I guess I'll just tell you, I found it surprising but encouraging that was working. I'm just kind of wondering what you think about that for mental health court and for probation violations as well.
Sure, I should have been more specific. For mental health court, jail is hardly ever used. It's mainly, concerns about their well-being and what they might, others' well-being out if they were outside of custody. So I should have clarified that is, I know they're all screened for jail alternatives from the get-go before they enter mental health court. But again, that is very rarely used in that setting. I should have been more clear. Sorry about that. Barry, did you want to add to that? No.
I really do. One of the things, and folks have probably heard about this, contingency management is essentially, in the old days, if you will, we called it a token society. Oftentimes people make a reference to getting a gold star. Well, if that's something that pulls up a memory from your elementary time, or whatever it happens to be, that was actually a token society. And it was a reward system. So contingency management is an evidence-based practice. And I suspect that many of the folks on this call probably are aware of the fact that it is one of the few treatment modalities that's effective for methamphetamine use disorder, which is astonishing. So when you think about it, I mean, really, it is a reward system for self-developing behaviors that are identified and so forth. And what a lot of times folks don't understand is that once that is created within a system like mental health court or recovery court, is that it also allows for a negative consequence, and that is you don't get your gift card or your reward in front of the group. And of course, again, we're using the influence of the group on that process as well. It's astonishingly impactful for the individual. I've always watched that from a distance and said, well, that makes sense. I mean, us as human beings seeking rewards, there's a whole process that I won't go into that, that occurs there, but incredibly powerful. And that's where, I've certainly had lengthy conversations with Robin Willens just in regards to, the fact that oftentimes, 24 hours in jail is not used as a negative consequence because it really doesn't fit into that whole process, and it's not really linked, to the individual's behavior and motivation. So if you haven't looked it up, it's a really good Google to look up contingency management and try and understand it a little bit, because it's an incredibly effective tool, oftentimes misunderstood, because the community might see it's like, what, you're giving people a gift card, to Goodwill or something of that nature, you're paying them for, and it's like, well, actually there's this built-in reward system that is quite effective in modifying behavior. So thought I would offer that while we were talking about this piece.
I'll jump in there too. Thank you, Barry. It's great that we get to be a part of the mental health court, because we see that those type of things work, and then we can take it to the whole department, right? And so a lot of times we have now kudo cards here in our offices. We have congratulation cards that we send out when they do certain things, right? Like we meet with them, we'll send them a text at the end of the day. Hey, what, all of our staff kind of get on that. So, just acknowledging accomplishments go a huge way, and establishing that rapport with the individual, recognizing those, because sometimes they haven't been given a compliment in months or years. So we do our best here to kind of change that perspective of, probation and the fear of jail all the time. So, Courtney?
I just wanted to return to Heather's question about those categories of charges, and just like my perspective of what I'm seeing on my end working with clients that may have been charged with that or have before. The way we think about domestic violence and substance use is very compartmentalized, and anybody can be a survivor of abuse or a perpetrator. And there's a lot of resources for survivors. The ones that are available for perpetrators, or those that are viewed as perpetrators of abuse, they don't tend to be, at least in my experience, trauma informed. And you see that revolving door because people are not getting the resources they need to address the roots behind their behavior and their life experiences or their alleged behavior. They're, right at the front of the door, they're getting, SUD assistance, but no one's really asking them about mental health or their life experiences or their childhood experiences. And sure, we can't do everything perfect right out the door all at once, but it would be nice to see more people getting that trauma-informed care right at the get-go. We're not focusing only on SUD. We're not only focusing on, are they a perpetrator of abuse? Because it's very likely that they are also survivors of abuse as well. And that cycle cannot be broken without addressing the co-occurring needs, the full spectrum of what that person is navigating, because it is never just SUD. It is never just DV. It is always so much more gray than that. And that's what to me, why I think we're seeing a lot of folks, especially with those charges, rotating through that door again and again, because they're going to IP treatment for SUD, but they're not getting anything else. And then they come back to the community, and often they have nowhere to live, nowhere to go, no one to, it's just a logistical nightmare for everyone involved. And you can imagine what it's like for someone who is at their worst place in their life trying to navigate that too. And what Jake was saying about, just having those resources available, having them ready, not having this delayed receipt of resources, that's what we need. But it also has to be a wide net that we're casting with folks. We can't focus on specific needs or conditions, because it's likely they have a little bit of everything.
Well, Jake and Bruce, I think we have peppered you with thousands of questions. Really appreciate both your presentation, but especially the discussion ensuing and your thoughtful and candid remarks. I think it's more than just satisfying curiosity, right? I think you can tell that people want to take this information, see how we can help you do the work that you do, appreciate the work that you do, so you all feel that, and how do we move forward as a community. But I personally want to thank you both. Perry, I want to apologize to you up front. We didn't save you a ton of time, and thank you for rescuing me when I butchered the name of your competency restoration group that you're kind of speaking from. But I think at this point we do need to shift, and again, thank Jake and Bruce, and please hang out. Perry, I know we didn't save you much time, but I know that you've got some succinct remarks and some thoughts from a recent meeting you have with competency restoration, and wondering what you could add to our conversation in our last 12 minutes or so.
Sure, absolutely. I'm not known for brevity, in the community. But I will make every effort to summarize the information that I have. I think that, as a matter of fact, a number of them are here. Folks are aware that there's been a competency restoration work group that has convened over roughly the last year, once a month, sort of getting together and talking about the challenges that I think that everybody is, pretty well informed of, in terms of competency restoration needs for individuals that are charged and incarcerated, and the limited availability of resources with the state. Western State Hospital and that kind of process. So this group got together and started taking a look at possible options to maybe alleviate some of those challenges and get people that are remaining incarcerated for a period of time, waiting for competency restoration out of jail, and having some kind of resources, to be able to refer them to. To that end, we invited an individual from there's a lot of acronyms in this, and so I'll try and lay that out. We invited an individual, Jason Carpin. He's actually a liaison and diversion specialist with the Office of Forensic Mental Health Services. I'm going to call that OFMHS, and asked him to talk about some potential resources through that office relative to prosecutorial diversion programs. There are PDPs, prosecutorial diversion programs that have been stood up, within the state. There's actually one in Spokane County, King County, and also Benton Franklin County at this point. And Whatcom County was really trying to take a look at maybe some available funding, but taking a look at the possibility of standing up a PDP and the challenges that there might be within that, particularly funding was one of the pieces. Well, Jason Carpin came and did a presentation to the North Sound Behavioral Health Administrative Services Organization, and had shared that there was actually some funding that was available through his office, which I had earlier been led to believe that we weren't able to access this funding through True Blood, which is, there's some accuracy to that. But The point being that as Mr. Carpin did his presentation, there was actually some funding that was available. So in that interest, I invited him to our last meeting. It was actually last Friday on the 15th of September, and he shared with us. Really short version, there is funding for prosecutorial diversion programs through the OFMHS office. And they are taking a look at actually expanding prosecutorial diversion programs within the state. So I think that we may be in a pretty good place to be able to at least have that discussion and do some brainstorming around the possibility of having something along those lines here. Essentially what happened was the Office of Forensic Mental Health Services had approached the BHASO to consider pass-through funding from their office to counties. And the BHASO, I don't have a lot of history on this, but the BHASO declined actually to work through that process, which really moved the Office of Forensic and Mental Health Services towards communicating with and contracting directly with counties. There's also a possibility, and there's some circumstances where they actually contract directly with providers that were providing prosecutorial diversion programs in other counties. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. The funding is still available. The access is still there. So
Perry, really quick.
Please.
I know we were talking, like, our prosecutor's office is using some diversion programs, right? Mental health court, drug court. Could you just real quickly for those of us explain how are these different? What is the nature of these diversion programs? And in your opinion, how does that kind of round out the things that we're already doing, if you could? Sorry to interrupt you. I just thought it might be helpful just to kind of help us move from that last one to where you're
Yeah,
at.
no, absolutely. So let me actually describe the structure of the Office of Mental Health Services, of Forensic Mental Health Services, actually had a description of what they consider to be sort of an ideal framework and what it was made up of and what it did. It varies, of course, from county to county out there as they currently exist. So we do have some models to be able to look at and gather additional information from. But essentially, these programs serve roughly 50 to 75 individuals per year. It's made up of a 0.25 FTE director, a 1 FTE program manager that's clinically credentialed, 2 FTE case managers that work within this program, and 1 FTE certified peer support specialist. And so essentially, you think of the components that are necessary for an individual that's struggling with serious mental illness at the level that a person that needs competency restoration would be struggling with, or individuals that are struggling at that level. Housing, as Courtney said, also behavioral health and support services, case management that is specifically directed towards that individual, prescriber services. This is a real key because medication is an absolute component of this. And support and supervision, connection to the community through the case managers, as well as a peer support specialist. So again, this is a program that is very similar in terms of kind of a wraparound service of connecting the individual to resources, having their own resources within the prosecutorial diversion program itself, and also utilizing resources that are in the community. So is a short, way of describing that program. For me, the exciting part about it was that there was no clear funding availability to stand up a program like this. I mean, my hope would be, for example, that we would actually have a provider within the community that would take the bulk of this work on, as opposed to a number of different entities that are, sort of, I guess we were talking about sort of siloed, entities or broken out entities that are trying to work together, but then struggle with that communication, et cetera. This is, all in one place. Now, housing and some of those pieces may not necessarily fit into it, at least initially, but at least at this point in time, we do have a specific identified program with that intent and purpose, and also working with those individuals that are at this point in time not able to get the competency restoration and not able to get the resources and services that they had hoped to have. Funding Availability and clarity will occur, as I understand from Mr. Carpin, probably about the first of the year. Really super generally, we have an opportunity to submit a proposal to the Office of Forensic and Mental Health Services, and basically an outline of, you know, what we suspect that the program costs would be, just, you know, the description of the framework of the program, and continue to work with that program to access that funding. It sounds like also that funding on a number of different levels is actually sustainable over a period of time, and that we would be receiving support, you know, from those levels. So I'm leaving a lot, you know, obviously off the table just in regard to our time frame, but I think that there's some possibilities to investigate here and some steps that we could take. Yeah, Brian, I see you have your hand up. You're still muted, Brian.
I just had a good of the order question, and I wanted to make sure we had time for that.
So that was pretty short there, Mike. I know that there's obviously a lot of other information that's available, but I'm more than happy to sort of return, especially as we take some additional steps of questions that, you know, that can certainly come up in regard to what do we do next.
Well, I think it's really helpful. I appreciate you coming today because I knew we were going to talk about some of these diversion programs. I knew they were going to come up. And I think it's important for people to realize there are some folks that may not be a good candidate for mental health court if their competency is in doubt, right? We need to find another pathway. And this isn't necessarily addressing the capacity issues that we talked about in those programs that we have that are successful. This adds a new opportunity without actually going through some outpatient competency restoration, which you and the other folks in your group are really running into. One, it's really a state, more of a state issue. Do we really take it on? But two, it's a lot harder to lift something like that up. So I just want to just mention why we added it to this particular meeting. You can see we had a rich discussion as it was, and I think it holds some promise, and there's also some timeliness to it. I do want to save time for Brian's good of the order question, and please, Peter.
Just quickly, Perry, what was the deadline for application?
As I'm understanding it now, and I'm in pretty regular communication with Jason Carpin, at this point, they are approaching the governor's office relative to the funding that's going to be available. Indications that I understood from Mr. Carpin was that there's about 1.3 million available now. There's also a doubling of that relative to Medicaid funding availability. And so they will know about those numbers at the first part of 2024. He said January. And basically a proposal, a good framed up proposal, they haven't given us a framework for that, that we would need to be able to submit to the Office of Forensic Mental Health and Services by April of 2024.
Very quickly, Brian, if you wanted to do your good of the order question, and then Jill, I'd like you to also just kind of scan and see if we've got anybody for public comment. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up the topic of potential asks of our legislative representative next year. I've been to several events recently, and they're interested in hearing ideas. Along with that, the National Alliance on Mental Illness did an analysis of state, laws and initiatives all around the country, some of which I think might be relevant for Whatcom County. So I would propose in the Behavioral Health Committee next month, we take up that issue of what is our legislative agenda next year. And it might be helpful to have people from public health or Tyler Schroeder or somebody. I mean, I just think we need to get this on the calendar more proactively than we did last year and start earlier.
Brian, excellent point. Kayla Schott-Bressler, in charge of special projects at the county, gave a brief presentation at yesterday's Incarceration Prevention Reduction Task Force meeting of the whole. And I love your idea of having it at our behavioral health meeting. That's a great idea. With that, and I'm sorry to rush through, I'm trying to keep as close as I can to on time. We're a little bit late. Jill, do we have anybody for public comment, please?
Yes, we do have one person with his hand raised. If anyone else would like to speak to the committees, please virtually raise your hand now by selecting the raise hand icon or by pressing *9 on your phone. Jason, go ahead and speak.
Hi, folks. Jason DeForest, local business owner. Just wanted to say a few things on the record. The reality is, from a national macro perspective, the majority of these court systems fundamentally don't work to prevent or reduce incarceration. Probation is a prescription for reincarceration. Acknowledging failures goes a very long way too, and most importantly, we need an RFP for a new hospital provider that works with this part of our community, not funnels them into the jail. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the committees? And no other hands are raised. Thank you.
Great. Perry, thanks again. I want to thank again Jake and Bruce for their presentations today. A very lively conversation. Do stay tuned. The task force is going to look at housing for justice involved individuals. I think we're hearing cross-current themes of how many programs could be made better by getting some housing for folks that are frequently in our justice system. Thank you all for coming today, and our meeting is adjourned.